All right, welcome. In this video, we're going to discuss how to handle single engine scenarios in the radar environment. So, up until this point, you should be given single engine scenarios on the ground via stand-ups or any of your tabletop EPs. Here, we're going to discuss how to handle them when you're actually in the airplane. So, let's talk about the why first. In the aircraft, why do we take a perfectly good engine and bring it back to idle to simulate that that engine is inoperative? Well, we're training you to fly multi-engine aircraft and move on to bigger and larger aircraft in the future. Notoriously speaking, as part of the business, you're going to get an engine out scenario most likely in your career at some point in your life. We want to train you to be able to understand how the aircraft is going to handle aerodynamically and how to mitigate the issue when it's presented to you. So first, why do we take an engine back and bring it back to idle? Why do we simulate single engine scenarios? Well, first we want to make sure that you're a good pilot and a good aviator and that you can handle the aircraft. We want to make sure that you can maintain aircraft control, aerodynamically speaking, when an engine goes out and you're presented with those roll and yaw forces into the dead engine. Two, when you're presented with a scenario like this, when you're presented with a pretty severe emergency, we want to make sure that you understand how to mitigate the issue with a crew. Now, from T1s, you will be a co-pilot somewhere, so you should understand how the team works. And from a co-pilot's perspective, we want to make sure that you understand a simple process of how to handle the scenario. We want to make sure that you can work as a team and get the job done and bring the aircraft to the ground safely. And three, we want to make sure that you're using critical thinking skills. We want to develop your ability to multitask and delegate to, in the end, bring the aircraft to a safe and logical conclusion. We want you to be able to bring the aircraft to the ground with minimal damage and no loss of life. So, why do we simulate our single engine scenarios? Why do we bring the engine back? We want to see that you can maintain aircraft control when there's a problem presented to you. We want to see that you can work together as a team and bring the aircraft to a safe and logical conclusion. So, up until this point, in the trans phase, when you lose an engine and the pattern, always say as the instructor is I have your left engine or I have your right engine. We don't actually give you a scenario. We just take that engine when you're ready and bring it back to idle, and then the maneuver's ready. You're just flying single engine at that point. For the navigation phase, we now present you a scenario that we need you to work through. So this video is going to offer a flow and a technique for you to handle these particular single engine scenarios. Now keep in mind, you are still responsible for reviewing the Section 3 of the Dash 1 and understanding all possible emergencies that you could handle. This video does not cover all EPs that you may get in the aircraft by any means. You're still responsible for reviewing Section 3. This is just a framework and a guide to help you handle the scenarios when you're actually in the airplane. So once you're done with your approach briefing, so let's say, here, approach briefing complete. You're going to take back the aircraft from the IP and you're going to say, "Sir, ma'am, ready for my single engine scenario." There we go, for single engine scenario. All right, so step one, finish your approach briefing. Step two, once you've gotten the aircraft back, ready for the single engine scenario. Step three, IP is going to give you the scenario. He's going to give you some details or some information that tells you my engine has failed, is failing at the moment, or is about to fail. And then now the scenario starts. So first and foremost, to simulate in actual real life when it happens, what do I want to do? I want to maintain aircraft control. I want to prepare myself for the engine being out. This is step 4. I want to prepare myself for those roll and yaw forces into the dead engine when it dies. So I want to maintain aircraft control. And again, this is essential. I want to do this above all things before I start running into checklists, before I start talking on the radios, before I start directing the crew to get ready for an approach. I want to maintain aircraft control. We have 2 good engines on this airplane and we can fly with one of them. So there's no need to make any hasty decisions. So once my IP gives me my scenario and I maintain aircraft control, I'm going to kind of work into an analysis phase. Now this may vary based on the scenario that the IP gives you. Again, let's say he just says the engine dies. Well, there's not really much analysis there other than looking at my engine instruments, feeling the control forces of the aircraft roll and yawing me into the dead engine. But maybe I have an engine fire and I get a light in the bell. Okay, I have a light in the bell, that's my analysis. Now I need to start working through the bold phase. So from the analysis phase, I'm now going to talk about either a bold phase for an engine fire or any other emergency checklist. Maybe I've got low oil pressure. Emergency checklists. So from my analysis, that should direct me to work on the appropriate checklist moving forward. Whether if it's an engine fire, should I work on the bold phase, or maybe I have low oil pressure, should I go into the low oil pressure emergency checklist and run through that? Cool. Now at some point, you're going to be left with the engine at idle because this is a single engine scenario, so we want to see how you fly the aircraft single engine. So you know one of the engines is going to stay back at idle. We're going to simulate based on what we have that the engine is inoperative, so the engine's out. Next, what I want to think about are 2 things. If the engine's out, do I want to restart it? Or if the engine's out, do I not want to restart it? For instance, let's say we start with the approach complete, or the approach briefing is complete. I'm ready for my scenario. The IP says your engine just dies. Well, first I'm going to maintain aircraft control, keep it level, keep it under control. Then we go to my analysis phase. Do I look at my engine instruments? Is anything turning still? Do I still have residual hydraulics or oil pressure? Cool. Any emergency checklists? Well, maybe I want to work on my emergency or my engine shutdown checklist in flight to get that settled. And then do I want to work on my restart checklist? Well, if I still have the engine turning, I can't hear anything, I didn't think any birds flew into the engine, maybe I want to restart. Or in that same sense, maybe I had an engine fire, do I want to restart? No, I definitely don't want to restart that. I want to continue with the bold phase and shut down the engine. Once I've made my decision on whether or not the engine's going to be restarted or not, I'm now going to go to the rest of my checklists I need to accomplish. So first, what I want to do is if I want to restart, do I do the restart checklist? Or if I'm going to shut it down or keep it off, do I want to go to my shutdown checklists? So after I made that decision, now I'm going to go to my single engine landing checklist, single engine missed approach or single engine go checklist, and then I want to make sure any normal checklists are done, maybe my pattern checklist, and rebrief my single engine scenario, or just ensure that it is complete. And finally, I want to look at my landing data. Because in the nav phase, you're going to go to multiple airfields, and a lot of them are going to be fairly short from what you're used to. So maybe I want to make sure that the landing data I have for my single engine configuration at 10 flap can still allow me to stop legally and safely on the runway. So there we go, step 7 and step 8. The way this would work in the aircraft and encompass all the why portions of what we discussed in the beginning of the video. First, the approach briefing is complete. I'm ready for my scenario. The IP gives me my scenario. I'm going to 1, maintain aircraft control. So that checks off the first portion of the why. Can I handle a single engine scenario? Next, I'm going to go to my analysis phase, see what the scenario is presented to me and how to move forward. Now, through, let's say, steps 6 through 7, I'm going to use my IP here. It's called a 6 through 8, sorry. I'm going to use the IP in the right seat to help me with my scenario. Now again, for training purposes, we kind of want you to direct everything to solidify that we know that you understand the content and what's going on here. say you're handling the problem, you've got the single engine scenario, you'd say, sir, ma'am, I'd like you to run these checklists. Awesome. You've now delegated and made your life a little easier and minimize the multitasking that's required of you by telling us to run checklists. So there we go. We've mitigated with the crew. We're delegating the tasks and handling the issue. Next, we want you to bring it to a safe and logical conclusion. Once you've run through all checklists, how am I going to end this scenario? Am I going to bring it to a landing? Am I going to bring it to a missed approach? Am I able to do that? Now, you may pre-brief that it's going to a missed approach. Obviously, we wouldn't plan that if we actually had a single engine scenario. But for all intents and purposes, we want to see that you now can bring it to a safe and logical conclusion. Have you handled the aircraft? Have you delegated with the crew? Is everybody on board with what the plan is? And have you completed all appropriate and applicable checklists? But in general, this is a technique for you to combat and handle single engine scenarios while in the radar environment.